Well, let's not stand on ceremony. My name's Dave Schoorens. It's spelled S-C-H-O-O-R-E-N-S. Okay. Now, if you look at that and you have trouble pronouncing it, say the word insurance, not drop the I-N. That's what I used to tell all my high school students. Yeah, it saved a lot of trouble. But it's all right. I've heard every possible iteration of that name, that Flemish name. So what I'm gonna, what I've written is a political thriller, or I like to call it political horror. And that was my way to get into this little thing. But actually, I wrote that into my book when it was published in November of 22. I had no idea that it might be a real thing. Now, as I look at it, you gotta love vampires and zombies and all the supernatural demons that are out there. It makes great fiction, great stories. But the rational side of us is saying, well, Ryan, such things, right? Okay, there are no zombies out there. Okay, so I look at my book, it's the horror that can happen. And you just have to look at the news these days, and you can see that. Because the novel's about what happens if democracy falls. We find ourselves in an autocracy. Where do we do that? What would be the effect on people? I don't need some sort of cataclysm to propel us into that. I mean, how many of you read Handmaid's Tale? Okay? A global fertility crisis was required. Outstanding book. I read it, I read her sequel to it also, Margaret Atwood. I don't do that. All I need is election. That might be enough. And so, if we lose our democracy, it would be our choice. And, well, we'll see a little bit more about the book later on. But first, I'd like just to be polite and introduce myself. Now, that's just a collage of different things. I do belong to the Association of Rhode Island Authors. That's my Tom Clancy-esque kind of photograph right there. You have a few minutes later on, I can tell you a story about I actually met the guy one time. And I get a podcast interview somewhere on Rhody Radio, but I am a veteran of this organization, the United States Coast Guard, from long ago. Longer than I wish to remember, 1980s. And I've lived in a few places. Anybody care to guess the country in that one? How's that as a hint? Deutschland, Germany. Und ich verstehe ein bisschen Deutsch. That's a little town called Gangelt. In all, I lived in Germany for about 7 years. Why? My wife's in the Air Force Dock and stationed up there. And I loved every minute of eating the extra 20 pounds that I gained. So we traveled all over places. Almost all those countries you see there. You went to Poland to learn how to be a Little League baseball umpire. That's a whole other story. I've got 3 college degrees, 2 graduate, 1 undergraduate in biology, and that biology one took me to being a teacher for about 15 years. High school, AP biology knowledge, biology college prep, biotechnology, and chemistry. And we did the AP biology reader thing in Kansas City. Outside of courtesy, there's nothing in my background that says I should write anything. But I did. All you guys offers? It's never too late. I mean, there's nothing that prevents you from trying if you haven't already written something. Nobody was more surprised than me when I got to those wonderful last 2 words in the book. Well, the end. You'd be surprised. Think of an idea. You come across an idea and you just start and let it take you someplace. And you know what? Outside of holding up my children when they were born, there's nothing like holding something in your own creation. This is mine and no one else's is mine. That is a real good feeling. So after that, now let's get on to the subject matter, political horror. Now, first thing that comes to mind is movies. What movie is that?
Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Yes. What year was it made?
Before I was born.
50, was it 56?
It beat me, yes.
Was it 56?
Yeah, beat me by 1 year. Kevin McCarthy, I think, is the lead actor right there. And, you know, the premise is all this stuff floats into the atmosphere, the pods turn into these mindless little creatures. That's a little thing on its little poster board there. Okay? The thing is, that movie, which was a pretty simple movie, people seem to attribute some sort of political message behind it. It's certainly a horror story, like a science fiction horror story. But reviewers and film historians, pundits have said, oh, it's commenting on Senator McCarthyism. Those days in the 50s, he was an extreme senator, held this nation in its grip. With McCarthy, so that is understood by everybody? Okay. Or maybe it was a comment on communism. The idea in the Eisenhower years that, you know, a certain conformity among people was expected. Because all the drone, all the pod people, you know, act the same and so forth as a collective. Maybe it's always fun to look at a movie after it's been out and try to attribute a political message to it. Maybe it was just a movie. Like the cigar, sometimes it's just a cigar. So maybe it was just a thriller and not as close to nothing else. However, science fiction, at least in my humble opinion, does represent a pretty good avenue for political commentary. Because you can write it off as just science fiction. You can read into it almost anything you want if it has a political message. Or you can just take it as face value. And in the horror genre, I'm sure there are horror books that are written maybe with a political message in mind, but it's zombies. You know, they don't exist. You can write it off. It's very comforting. I remember seeing a lot of movies with a political message. How many of you have seen this one? Kurt Douglas, Golden Age of Hollywood. 7 Days in May, right? It's about a military takeover of the United States, an overthrow of the duly elected government. Well, that would never happen, right? And the villain in this is the 4-star Air Force general, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And that's played by Burt Lancaster. You've seen other movies, probably, on TCM or whatever. Or maybe this one here. Nuclear war seems to be quite prevalent genre for political commentary. Have you ever seen Threads? Yeah, it's just a horrifying movie. It's about a nuclear war and the aftermath of it in England, 1984. Something closer to home, the day after. Okay, you want to have fun with nuclear war? There's Dr. Strangelove, Stanley Kubrick, and even this one here, The War of the Worlds. Straightforward up, you know, alien invasion. There are some who would say that H.G. Wells was writing that as the aliens stood in for the Germans. since this was written before the First World War. That's a plausible hypothesis. Of course, HD is dead, can't really ask him. And we can update political commentary movies with this one here, now climate change, the day after. The scientists didn't really tell you it can't happen that fast. Physics just won't work. But it makes for a pretty good movie, even with Dennis Quaid. There was something though that inspired my novel, political commentary. Its own version of political horror. It's an old book. Sinclair Lewis, 1935. It can't happen here. How many have read that? Do you like it?
I did.
Yeah. It imagines the fall of democracy in the United States into a kind of fascist, corporate kind of government. The language occasionally is a bit archaic, but it's still a pretty easy read. But you think of when he wrote that, the emergence of a populist dictator. In 1935, how many democracies do you think existed on this planet? 100? 50? How about 10? We had dictators, what I call them Nazis, Stalinists, or Japanese imperialists, that spanned the globe. We were decidedly outnumbered. And 1935, what was the thing going on in the United States? When your grandparents were young. What happened then? 1930s. The Great Depression. And there was a lot of searching for the solution, and democracy seemed to be moving too slow, even when FDR was there. Oops. And make sure I'm in the right place. Yep. Democracy was seen as something that could not get the job done. That you had a more authoritarian government. Those are Americans there. Nearby here, actually. That's Fritz Kuhn, the guy up there in front of the boat on the platform there. He was a leader of the American Nazi movement. He imagined himself to be an American Führer. And he was fairly popular. I want to gauge your popularity. This may be hard to believe. We want to look at that history. February 20th, 1939. This is only a matter of months before the Second World War kicked off. In Madison Square Garden in New York City, 20,000 people attended openly as Nazis. All Americans, right there. With pictures of George Washington and Adolf Hitler, often side by side. Now, that's the kind of thing that I think Sinclair Lewis was warning about in his political horror novel. We even had, by the way, Hitler youth camps, essentially, Americanized versions of that, on Long Island, of all places. All the vestiges of those things have been gotten rid of. And those American Nazis, the German-American woman, a number of them wound up incarcerated by the FBI once the war started. But it's frightening to see that how many people, Americans, we probably call them patriots, themselves patriots, went along with this and were sympathetic to it. So Lewis's book, even today, serves as a warning. Okay, I can be egotistical for 1 second here and say that my book is not taken from Lewis's book. It still happened here. It can happen here. Do you think it can happen here? see some nodding heads. Yeah, there's a chance. And that's something I guess we have to always be in mind. So that's where maybe a little bit of political horror becomes useful. That's the way, I have something to say. I've said it in the form of a novel. I did write an academic tome. Hardly anybody's going to, pick up and read. Maybe a story, an anecdote, a story. That sometimes is far more powerful. So I went through when I was writing this, and I was doing, the end is done. Now I'll do the author's note at the back. Oh, thank God, this thing is NB Bible. And so I went through the various genres. This is a quote right from the author's note, and I settled on that, political horror. I often call it a political thriller, but I like to call it also a political horror story. If you've managed to elect enough perfectly natural and mortal demons already. So, imagine my shock and horror when it turned out that somebody already said it. I thought, great, I thought of a new thing. There's hardly anything original left on this planet. So it turns out to be a real genre. And of course, this is just one instance of that. An article that I found that went through about 10 different movies that at least the critics and perhaps the people who made it suggested in political horror, like Get Out, Don't Believe Nice People, and The Purge movies. Very nice, wonderful fantasy. Move on from that, please. And then the other one, you recognize that one? The third one? Stepford Wives. This goes back a few decades. Now we call them Senators from Alabama. So I call mine political horror because it's plausible. And any books like that. It could happen. And that's the way I view it. Political horror, one of the qualifications might be that it could happen. If you do it straight up, allegorical kind of stuff, through science fiction. Just it could happen. And as I often say, I'm hoping my story does not become history. And that's just some of the people who have read it, commented on Amazon. I'll brag a little bit. I've got 11 reviews so far, 4.5 out of 5. In Canada, it's 4.8. And that's it. Okay? It's getting late. Do you have any questions or thoughts? Other movies that had an impression on you that's kind of the same way? Anything, a book? Teacher me is what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When I reach 10, I say, okay, this is 6, 7, 8. I'm good to go, guys.